war in Ukraine after a year and some months. My name is Paul Thomas. With us tonight, Pat Chesbro, Marilee Radulich, and Thaddeus Paul Hamas. I've been scouring the web for news stories that tell where the missiles landing on civilian targets are being launched from. Granted, my internet search skills are very poor. This information could be protected under the guise of sensitive military intelligence, but I think that the Ukrainians have the desire to take out these launch points, whether they are located in Russian-held parts of Ukraine, somewhere on the Black Sea, or in Russia proper. If these missiles, some ballistic, are being launched from inside Russia or from aircraft that take off from airfields inside Russia, is it not proper for the Allies to provide the intelligence, materiel, and political permission to destroy this capability? Or are overt attacks on Russian soil too dangerous to contemplate? Marilee, you understand the question. These civilian targets are coming from missiles or launched from aircraft, and they're killing Ukrainian civilians. Should the Ukrainians not have the right, if they have the capability, to knock these out if they're being launched from Russia?
I think so. I thought they were trying to do some of it. I thought that was some of the reasons why we're, providing more firepower. But yeah, I know he gets bent out of shape when Russia gets attacked, but it is war and they're fighting for their survival and their territory. So I'm not a military logistics expert, but I would think that's all's fair, right?
I would think it, yeah. That's why I put the question out. The fact that they're coming from Russia, and then they say, well, you can't attack Russia because that'll start World War III. Well, then don't launch from Russia, but
as long as it's Ukraine doing it, though, and not
exactly
the NATO nations, right?
Yeah. Pat, as long as it's Ukraine doing it, but of course Ukraine is using weaponry that is being supplied by the West. But what do you think about these attacks on the capability of the Russians to launch these missiles against the civilian population of Ukraine?
I think they should absolutely do it if they have the stuff. And one of the things that's an interesting part of this is, remember, was it 2014? Whenever they made a big treaty that the Ukrainians would give up all their nuclear stuff, and they did, and Russia was a signee of that, and now Russia is anyway. But I think and whether or not if we provide materials that they can use to send stuff into Russia, so what? I mean, I just think I think as long as we don't do it, as long as those aren't Air Force bombers or Air Force things, or we don't do it, I mean, I think they have to defend themselves,
But Thaddeus, I don't think they have been going into Russia. I don't, of course, like I said, my internet research skills are really bad, and I haven't heard any reports that have cited Ukrainian incursions of any type into across the border into Russia. And Marilee and Pat both think they're justified in doing so, as do I. So, do you know anything more?
Not much. Now, I have seen a couple of reports of very small, insignificant incursions that are slightly over the Russian border, but they didn't amount to much. The fact that we are not hearing from, about, massive bombings of launch sites in Russia is probably that A, the Ukrainians don't have long enough range missiles to do so, and
which is a decision that is made by the Allies doing the supplying.
yeah, and they're making that decision based in part on Putin's very vocal condemnation of, well, if they're using bombs that came from the US, then as far as I'm concerned, the US is at war with Russia. And so, the United States has been very hesitant to go forward with this, but it looks like we're going forward with it anyway. And I think now if they have the capability of doing this, they are going to be very scrupulous about making sure that whatever they aim at Russians is going to be aimed at military targets 100%. They are not going to allow themselves to make a mistake and, harm the head of a single civilian. They are not going to stoop down to Russia's level on this, because the other nations that are watching Putin breaking all the rules, Geneva Convention be damned. And Ukraine wants to win fair and square, I think.
In spite of my 17 plus years of Catholic education, or maybe because of it, I have become increasingly suspicious of what I hear coming from religious authorities. The main religion in Russia is the Orthodox Church, who has not been shy at all about supporting the invasion of Ukraine. What do you see as the primary motivation behind the Russian Orthodox decision to publicly, enthusiastically endorse Putin's cruelty? Thaddeus, you're my religious expert here. So what do you see the reason?
Three things first: money, money, and money. If I am not mistaken, the Russian Orthodox Church is supported by the state. So if they go against what the head of state is saying, they lose their support, and probably some of their bishops, or whatever they call their bigwigs in Russian Orthodoxy, may wind up in jail in the north somewhere. I think that the Russian bishops are very, very leery of the whole idea of criticizing, even in the mildest terms, what Putin is doing. Now, I can't admire this, because they're supposed to be religious leaders, and they're supposed to be operating on faith, but they also are people who provide religious and spiritual services to the ordinary people of Russia, and they may be trying to hold on to their goodwill from the Putin office, so they can continue to have services for the people. I wish that there were, that they had a better idea on how to do this and how to stand up to a tyrant for his tyranny. But I do think that there are a little two sides to this, because they are trying to be at once spiritual leaders and at the same time trying to keep their church doors open.
See any hypocrisy here, Marilee?
Yes, that would not be operating in good faith, would it? You never really understood how the Russian Orthodox Church was funded, but if you're saying it's state funded, I looked more of it as a power grab for them in, which kind of like akin to more like the Catholic Church. I too was raised in the Catholic Church.
Me too.
So, so you have
So
some,
we have four Catholics here. We're almost, we have a better
sorry,
record than the
Thaddeus.
Supreme Court. They're only 7-9. We're 4 for 4. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Because as I understand it, Russian Orthodox Church is the church of all the former USSR countries, correct? And so, and if you look at Ukraine as being probably one of the most third world or most advanced of all of those with respect to democracy and its, European alliances and stuff, that it would really be a coup in a sense. But if you're saying taking over Ukraine just makes it a state, it's just larger state funded. I don't know, other than what you're saying, then they're just afraid to be brave. They're nothing but cowards. Their sense of humanity is wrecked by oppression. So sad. It's just very sad. Yeah, that's all.
Bunch of cowards, Pat.
Well, I tried to look this up. As I said before, my sister-in-law was Ukrainian, and her parents were married. Well, her stepmother and father were married in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, so I knew there was a difference. But here's something that I read. During the first 5 years of the Soviet power, the Bolsheviks executed 28 Russian Orthodox bishops and over 1,200 Russian Orthodox priests. Many others were imprisoned or exiled. Believers were harassed and persecuted. Most seminaries were closed, and the publications of most religious material was prohibited. So they didn't have a very good time in the beginning of the Soviet Union. And what I read was Stalin decided they were better at getting people to be patriotic than the state. So that's why he started to support the Russian Orthodox Church. And that is also why he brought in the Ukrainian Orthodox churches be under that guise as well. So it said, one of the things that they survived through tense acquiescence. I think that they are afraid. They might be cowards and they might not want to stand up, but look what happened to them before. I'm sure they remember that this is the way they were treated. And I'm sure they're under a very, just like the rest of the Russians, they're under this big hammer. And I read that the Ukrainian Orthodox are trying to get out from under that because they want to be on their own. They don't want to be under the Russian Orthodox anymore. So there's that kind of thing going on as well. So I don't think we can look to see the Russian Orthodox Church be brave, but I think we can look to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church to stand up and say what's really going on. So
the Russian Orthodox Church is with Russia, and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is with Ukraine.
I think so.
I like that outcome. Are we doing enough to keep the Ukrainians supplied? Are there any weapons currently not being supplied to Ukraine that you feel the Western alliance should be forking over? Marilee, is there any? Thaddeus just mentioned that the Patriot missile system was just, finally arrived. But should we be doing more than what we're doing with supplies?
I'm not really, I think we're doing a lot. I think we're doing everything in balance with what Zelensky is requesting. I know that there's a lot of national complaining. People don't want to fund this war, but we still are, and we're doing it with our allies. But I don't really know.
Zelensky's been asking for warplanes from the beginning. And we haven't given him
Poland going to supply them then? Poland and Germany, I thought. Hadn't they? And nobody, I know we were asking them not to for a while, but I didn't think that, I thought at some point we had finally consented that now was the time. And I thought they were coming from Europe.
Yeah, I think they were going to give them some MiGs from old MiGs from Poland. And then we were going to resupply the Poles with some F-16s. but I don't believe that they have been really deployed as of yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have not
You
heard
know,
that.
this war was kind of like big news for a while, but it's been off the charts. I guess Trump has taken all the oxygen from the news
As
story.
usual.
That and the murders. Pat, is there anything more we should be doing?
Well, I don't know the military stuff. I did see that they're sending Stryker tanks from Fairbanks. So I'm sure that's important. Zelensky always, I mean, Zelensky wants more all the time, and and understandably so.
Mhm.
I worry about how are we doing enough to support the actual people and make sure they have food. I heard just a piece of a conversation about somebody whose family was in Ukraine, and they were talking about the places to live have been a lot of destroyed. They're all crammed into small spaces. They don't have food. They don't have access to things. And I worry that we're not doing enough on that front to help the people and make sure that they have medical supplies and food and all those kinds of things, shelter. And so I don't know the military stuff, but I think we need to take care of the people.
Okay, Thaddeus, you initially said something about airplanes at the very beginning of the show. You think they should be getting more airplanes from the West?
Well, I kind of do, but I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. Do they need to be coming from the United States, or are there other NATO partners who are able to do that? I think that if there are European countries who have the hardware to supply, they can get it to them faster because they're 3,000 miles closer. That it just might be a little bit more effective if their planes are coming from Poland instead of Lackland Air Force Base. And I'm kind of ashamed that I didn't think what Pat thought of when considering this question, because all I was thinking about was military hardware. There's a whole lot more to having a country survive a war than just having the right kind of bombs to drop on the enemy. So thank you for bringing that into the discussion.
Yeah, the people need to be fed and sheltered. There was initially a concern that European reliance on Russian fossil fuel supply would have a chilling effect this past winter on European resolve to support Ukrainian resistance. How do you think this resolve has held up? And do you think that over time, the price of fuel in this inflationary era could substantially weaken it? Thaddeus, how are the Europeans holding up? And do you think that they're going to maintain this support?
Well, I think there's a balance between economics and patriotism. I think that there's an awful lot riding on the pure passion of the Ukrainian people, and by extension, some of the inherited passion of the people of NATO to win this thing, despite the fact that fuel has been an enormous stumbling block for everyone, especially through this winter.
Do you see over time, because this thing is going on, we're headed into the second year now, over time that resolve could subside somewhat?
It's possible, but I'm going to put my bet on the passion of the people on that. I have high hopes that they are going to be able to sustain it. The place where I'm afraid most that will to win is going to be hardest to sustain is over here in the United States, where it really hasn't cost the ordinary American people very dearly to support this effort.
Pat, European Resolve, is it wearing thin, or do you think it's going to be sustainable, like the passion Thaddeus referred to?
I think it can be sustainable. I think the fact that they've endured the winter now, I think that's a good sign. They know they can do it. They did make sure they did survive the winter, even though there was an awful lot of talk about that. And so they may be able to be better prepared this year. I don't know. And I don't know where they stand, but I think, as you know, as Thaddeus said, they're more in danger from Putin than we are in many ways. But Americans have gotten pretty darn greedy. And I really worry about, especially this House of Representatives with McCarthy, who doesn't seem to have a principled bone in his body to support people who are working so hard to just survive and be democratic. I worry about us, but the Europeans, they've really done a good job, and they're, now it's summer. They can enjoy it. I wish it was summer here.
European Resolve, Mary Lee, you see it holding up?
I certainly have not heard much negativity. I think they might have had a milder winter that I had heard, but California didn't. And so I've heard a lot of complaining here about our fuel prices. And I have to agree with you about McCarthy and the GOP and everybody, complaining that Biden's caused all these great fuel hikes. And it's just sad, it's sad that we are so self-centered and materialistic here. But I do believe that the core of Americans and Europeans understand just how vitally important preserving the Ukrainian democracy is. And that's our buy-in. These are just some of the sacrifices that we have to make.
Well, despite the lack of American resolve at home, I feel pretty encouraged by what I've just heard tonight from you three. So that concludes our discussion. And I want to thank our panel, Mary Lee, Thaddeus, Pat. It was a great discussion. And I know we're all amateurs here as far as like military logistics and understanding all that. But it's still for common folk to have their say in what's going on in the world. So thanks to the panel and all you out there in Cyberland. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.